So we're going to start with the first question, and this came from Shala Anna Lucia. Shala asks, is it possible to bring about health on this planet if every newborn was given the right upbringing education? Followed by, what would the ideal education model for humanity look like? So Ken, that's a big one. I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, it is a big one, and so we need to cover just a few components to make sure we're touching all the bases. And one of the things we have to remember here is that the human being is a complex combination of various aspects, different dimensions, different levels of development, different lines of development, or multiple intelligences, different states of consciousness, including ones like enlightenment or awakening, different types, and so on. In integral theory, we summarize all these with a framework. It's technically called AQAL, A-Q-A-L, which is short for all quadrants, all levels, all lines, all states, all types. But those are really just ways to summarize all of these various components of a human being. And if we're going to have a truly whole education, we're going to have to touch on all of these areas. So I mentioned quadrants, and quadrants just means different perspectives, like I, we, it. Those are three very real, very important, but very different domains. They're the basis of things like the good, the true, and the beautiful. The good is the we, or how we treat each other, ethics. The true is the it domain, or objective truth, or facts, the realm of science. And beauty is the I domain, or beauty in the eye of the beholder, or all the great individual and personal potentials of any human. All three of those domains are important. But today, most education focuses just on the it domain, or teaching facts and objective truth. It leaves out or ignores the we domain, or interpersonal intelligence and social interaction and ethical values. And it's very thin on the I domain, personal realities and values and purpose and potentials. And it turns out that the I domain is actually very important, especially in education. And it consists of things including different lines of development or multiple intelligences. Usually education just focuses on only one or two of our multiple intelligences. But we now know human beings have upwards of a dozen different multiple intelligences, most of which are just thoroughly ignored. Education mostly focuses on cognitive intelligence or book smarts, but there's also emotional intelligence, moral intelligence, values intelligence, aesthetic intelligence, spiritual intelligence, among others. And all of those are incredibly important. They're all very real. They actually exist. They're not just theoretical, and they're all almost completely ignored. What we've also learned, which is absolutely fundamental, is that all those lines of development grow and evolve through a series of stages or levels of development. One version of those levels, for example, goes from magic to mythic to rational to pluralistic to integral. These levels are really important because they're the basic frameworks or grids or worldviews through which we see and interpret and experience our world in any of our multiple intelligences. Thus, for example, the postmodern feature of culture anywhere nowadays is something called the culture wars. And the culture wars are ongoing cultural battles between what are widely recognized as three different worldviews or value systems. And these are simply the three most common values, or the three most common of these levels that I just mentioned. In other words, the three combatants in the culture wars are, one, the traditional religious, usually with what's called the mythic literal worldview. Then 2, modern science with a rational worldview. And then 3, postmodern multiculturalism with a pluralistic or relativistic worldview. In short, the culture wars are pre-modern, modern versus postmodern, or mythic, rational versus pluralistic. And what none of the individuals who are involved in these culture wars seem to realize is that those are 3 of the major levels of development available to all human beings. But we don't educate for any of that, even though it's the predominant feature in today's culture, present everywhere and unrelentingly. What's more, as research shows, there are yet higher levels of development or levels of consciousness, which only a very small portion of the population has developed to so far, such as the integral level. And we don't teach those because we mostly just aren't aware of them. So families don't teach them, education doesn't teach them, and the culture at large certainly doesn't teach them. So humanity is flying way under its full potential simply because we do not educate for the whole or complete human being. We educate for just a small part, a slice, a fragment of what's possible for us. And we certainly see this with another element in the Aqua framework, namely states of consciousness. Because according to the great wisdom traditions around the world, not only do humans possess typical states of consciousness like waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, they also possess profoundly high states of consciousness like enlightenment or awakening, so-called moksha, satori, gnosis, metamorphosis, the great liberation. And none of our standard educational systems teach any of that. Now, all of these factors I've mentioned, from the good and the true and the beautiful, or I, we, and it, to multiple intelligences, to levels of development, to states of enlightenment or waking up, none of these are rare, isolated, esoteric, far out, strange, or occult. They're all some of the very most basic and most fundamental potentials of a human being everywhere. They're simply human 101, yet we don't educate human 101. We educate something like human 1/10. We are educating very partial, very fragmented, very broken people. It's tragic, really. And then we wonder why the planet and humanity itself is in such trouble. So yes, I firmly believe that we could bring about health on this planet, for the planet and for the humans on it, if we started educating the whole person with all their fundamental potentials and capacities and skills, and stop this fragmented, partial, broken system that we have now. Absolutely. And not doing so, really, it's just tragic.